Good morning, students. Today we are going to learn, or rather we are going to read the chapter The Sound Machine, written by Roald Dahl. Roald Dahl was a British novelist, and he was also a short story writer, a poet, a screenwriter, and fighter pilot. He was also considered as one of the greatest storytellers of 20th century. Our present text, The Sound Machine, which basically deals with the obsession of the protagonist, the obsession for sounds. It was originally published in 1949 in the New Yorker, and its primary source is the collected short stories of Roald Dahl. As we will be continuing with the story, we will come to know that this particular text or this particular story not only deals with an obsession for sound, this also provides us a scope to explore the general tendency as we label those people mad who basically hold a different viewpoint from the rest of the world. And as we will be continuing with reading this story, we will discover much more things hidden within this text. I hope all of you have kept your books, your text ready with you. Now let us start. It was a warm summer evening, and Klonza is the protagonist of the story. Klonza walked quickly through the front gate and around the side of the house and into the garden at the back. He went on down the garden until he came to a wooden shed, and he unlocked the door, went inside, and closed the door behind him. The interior of the shed was an unpainted room. So the point we must keep our track, the interior of the shed was an unpainted room. That means here we find he is going to do some research work, and this is definitely we can understand it's the chamber where he does his work, which is not that much furnished. It's unpainted. Okay. Against one wall on the left, there was a long wooden workbench, and on it, among a littering of wares and batteries and small sharp tools, there stood a black box about 3 feet long, the shape of a child's coffin. So here, the child's coffin. Here also, in this description, we find that it's hinting at the probability that the machine is going to get ruined. Okay, and the author provides us this hint by conflating it with a dead child's coffin. All right. Klonza moved across the room to the box. The top of the box was open, and he bent down and began to poke and peer inside it among a mass of different colored wares and silver tubes. He picked up a piece of papers that lay beside the box, studied it carefully, put it down, peered inside the box, and started running his fingers along the wares, tugging gently at them to taste the connections, glancing back at the paper, then into the box, then at the paper again, checking each ware. He did this for perhaps an hour. So we can observe, though the room was not that much as we generally find people to do their research work in laboratories or some in a very fine facility, within certain fine facilities, but here we find that Klonzer's chamber or shop or the place, workspace where he works, it's actually unadorned. but that also indicates that he is purely dedicated to the sole purpose uh, of the invention he wants to invent. All right. Then he put a hand around to the front of the box where there were three dials, and he began to twiddle them, watching at the same time the movement of the mechanism inside the box. So he kept on observing the thing before he continues with his work. All right. All the while he kept speaking softly to himself, nodding his head, smiling sometimes, his hands always moving, the fingers moving swiftly, deftly inside the box, his mouth twisting into curious shapes when a thing was delicate or difficult to do, saying, "Yes, yes, and now this one, yes, yes, but is this right? Is it where's my diagram? Ah, yes, of course. Yes, yes. That's right. And now? Good, good. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. His concentration was intense. So we can understand how dedicated he was and how much indulged into his invention he was, that he kept on talking to his own self. And he was not that much worried about what's going on around. So uh, he used to talk to his own self, and he was deeply indulged. All right. His concentration was intense, his movements were quick. There was an air of urgency about the way he worked, of breathlessness, of strong suppressed excitement. So the man was restless. He was restless to continue with his work. We can understand that he was so obsessed. Okay, his moves were his movements were quick. All right, his movements were quick. So he fished all around and peered inside the box. He picked up things and kept it again. Means all these things only indicates that he was much anxious, he was much excited, and he was much involved and deeply indulged into his work. This story is written in a very clean and clear tone as well as a language. I hope you all can go through and understand. Suddenly, he heard footsteps on the gravel path outside, and he straightened and turned swiftly as the door opened and a tall man came in. It was Scott. It was only Scott, the doctor. His family, the doctor of the family, entered. Well, the doctor said, "So this is where you hide yourself in the evenings." "Hello, Scott," Clownzer said. "I happened to be passing," the doctor told him, "so I dropped in to see how you were. There was no one in the house, so I came on down here. How's that throat of your been behaving?" So we can understand that the protagonist Clownzer was not well. So the doctor came, and he was about to take information. He was about to collect information regarding his health. "It's all right. It's fine. Now I'm here, I might as well have a look at it. Please don't trouble. I'm quite cured. I'm fine." So the man, as I said, he was deeply engrossed in his work, and when he hears the footsteps outside, and he finds that doctor, and he is not at all ready to accept his presence. All right. The doctor began to feel the tension in the room. He looked at the black box on the bench. Then he looked at the man. "You have got your hat on," he said. "Oh, have I?" Clownzer reached up, removed the hat, and put it on the bench. So the man was not that much aware of that he was wearing his hat while doing the work, and that means again it establishes his obsession with his invention. All right. The doctor came up closer and bent down to look into the box. "What is this?" he said. "Making a radio?" "No, just fooling around. It's got rather complicated. It's got rather complicated looking innards." Yes, Clownzer seemed tense and distracted. "What is it?" the doctor asked. "It's rather a frightening looking thing, isn't it?" "It's just an idea." "Yes, it has to do with sound, that's all." "Good heavens, man, don't you get enough of that sort of thing all day in your work?" "I like sound." "So it seems." The doctor went to the door, turned, and said, "Well, I won't disturb you. Glad your throat's not worrying you any more." But he kept standing there, looking at the box, intrigued by the remarkable complexity of its inside, curious to know what this strange patient of his was up to. "What's it really for?" he asked. "You have made me inquisitive." Clownzer looked down at the box, then at the doctor, and then reached up and began gently to scratch the lobe of his right ear. There was a pause. The doctor stood by the door, waiting, smiling. "All right, I'll tell you if you are interested." There was another pause, and the doctor could see that Clownzer was having trouble about how to begin. He was shifting from one foot to other, tugging at the lobe of his ear, looking at his feet, and then at last slowly he said, "Well, it's like this. The theory is very simple, really. The human ear, you know that it can't hear everything. There are sounds that are so low pitched or so high pitched that it can't hear them." "Yes," the doctor said. "Yes. Well, speaking very roughly, any note so high that it has more than 15,000 vibrations a second, we can't hear it. Dogs have better ears than us. You know, you can buy a whistle whose note is so high pitched that you can't hear it at all, but a dog can hear it." "Yes, I have seen one," the doctor said. So here we find Clownzer. He is hesitating to explain or to express his thing to the doctor. Again, it provides us the scope to explore the means the theory of or the tendency to put a level to those people mad who have the quality to think to observe things in a different way. All right, so as it is already told that the protagonist, he wants to his this story is all about obsession and obsession of sound, and he this the protagonist, he wants to hear all sort of sounds that's available on this universe. All right, he wants to take a catch or take a hold of all those sounds that is available in this world. All right, so here he wants to make the doctor understand that there are various types of sounds, it's high pitched or low pitched, that can't be heard in a normal way, but he wants to invent a machine that can catch all of them. All right, let us continue. "Of course you have, and up the scale higher than the note of that whistle, there is another note, a vibration if you like, but I prefer to think of it as a note. You can't hear that one either." So here the Clownzer, here the protagonist once again wants to address the sound as note, means he depicts it in a musical way. He addresses it as note. "You can't hear that one either, and above that there is another and another rising right up the scale for ever and ever and ever, an endless succession of the notes, an infinity of notes. There is a note, if only our ears could hear it, so high that it vibrates a million times a second, and another a million times as high as that, and on, higher and higher, as far as numbers go, which is infinity, eternity beyond the stars. So the poet, the I'm sorry, as it is explained, you can address it as well. The man's obsession can be compared with the obsession of a poet. All right, Clonza was becoming more animated every moment. He was a small, frail man, nervous and twitchy, with always moving hands. His large head inclined towards his left shoulder, as though his neck were not quite strong enough to support it rigidly. His face was smooth and pale, almost white, and the pale grey eyes that blinked and peered from behind a pair of steel spectacles were bewildered, unfocused, remote. Here we get the physical appearance of the person, and the person, we can understand his face is white, it's pale, but his determination and his dedication, it's absolutely firm. All right, he was a frail, nervous, twitchy little man, a moth of a man, dreamy and distracted, suddenly fluttering, animated, and now the doctor, looking at the strange pale face and those pale grey eyes, felt that somehow there was about this little person a quality of distance, of immense, immeasurable distance, as though the mind were far away from where the body was. So this story, this is basically a science fiction, and it's a science fiction, and we find both fantasy and reality into it. All right, and the man's physical appearance, his gestures and everything once again establishes that the man is not capable enough to take very good care of his own self, or is not that, but the man is immensely dedicated to his work, and this obviously establishes his obsession and his interest, how but means it becomes, it turns into immense obsession. All right, the doctor waited for him to go on. Clonza shied and clasped his hands tightly together. I believe, he said, speaking more slowly now, that there is a whole world of sound about us all the time that we cannot hear. It is possible that up there is no, in those high pitched inaudible regions, there is a new exciting music being made with subtle harmonies and fierce grinding discords. A music so powerful that it would drive us mad if only our ears were tuned to hear the sound of it. There may be anything, for all we know, there may. See, once again, the sounds are traced as music, and the man is eager. He is means immensely eager to find out or to reveal the new exciting music. All right, that is inaudible in normal regions, in normal capabilities, but he is eager to invent it somehow. Yes, the doctor said, but it's not very probable. Why not? Why not? Clonzer pointed to a fly sitting on a small roll of copper wire on the workbench. You see that fly? What sort of noise is that fly making now? None that one can hear. But for all we know, the creature may be whistling like mad on a very high note, or barking, or croaking, or singing a song. It's got a mouth, hasn't it? It's got a throat. The doctor looked at the fly and he smiled. He was still standing by the door with his hand on the doorknob. Well, he said, so you are going to check up on that. Some time ago, Clonza said, I made a simple instrument that proved to me the existence of many odd, inaudible sounds. Often I have sat and watched the needle of my instrument recording the presence of sound vibrations in the air when I myself could hear nothing. And those are the sounds I want to listen to. I want to know where they come from and who or what is making them. And that machine on the table there, the doctor said, is that going to allow you to hear these noises? It may, who knows? So far, I have had no luck, but I have made some changes in it, and tonight I am ready for and the trial. This machine, he said, touching it with his hands. This machine is designed to pick up sound vibrations that are too high pitched for reception by the human ear and to convert them to a scale of audible tones. I tune it in almost like a radio. So here he gives proper explanation of what about his agenda. All right. How you mean? It is not complicated. See, I wish to listen to the squeak of a bat. That's a fairly high pitched sound, about 30,000 vibrations a second. The average human ear can't quite hear it. Now, if there were a bat flying around this room and I tuned in to 30,000 on my machine, I would hear the squeaking of the bat very clearly. I would even hear the correct note, F sharp or B flat or whatever it might be, but merely at a much lower pitch. Don't you understand? So we understand that he wants to listen to all sort of sounds revolving around the world. He wants to concentrate not only on the living things, he also wants to concentrate on plants and all. Those will also be revealed shortly. The doctor looked at the long black coffin box. And you are going to try it tonight? Yes. Well, I wish you luck. He glanced at his watch. My goodness, he said, I must fly. Goodbye and thank you for telling me. I must call again sometime and find out what happened. The doctor went out and closed the door behind him. For a while longer, Clonzer fussed about with the wares in a black box. Then he straightened up and, in a soft, excited whisper, said, Now we will try again. We will take out into the garden this time and then perhaps, note here, he says, now we will try again. We means he himself and his machine. Okay, so he started his obsession once again. It is proved his obsession that he continues to think that the machine is a living agent. Thus he addresses, now we will try again. We will take it out into the garden this time and then perhaps the reception will be better. Lift it up now, carefully. Oh my God, it's heavy. He carried the box to the door, found that he couldn't open the door without putting it down, carried it back, put it on the bench, opened the door, and then carried it with some difficulty into the garden. How careful he was, that must be noted. Alright, he was not capable to carry his own self, that is already explained, but he took much trouble so that the machine remains very safe. Alright. He placed the box carefully on a small wooden table that stood on the lawn. He returned to the shed and fetched a pair of earphones. He plugged the wire connections from the earphones into the machine and put the earphones over his ears. The movements of his hands were quick and precise. He was excited and breathed loudly and quickly through his mouth. He kept on talking to himself with little words of comfort and encouragement, as though he were afraid that the machine might not work, and afraid also of what might happen if it did. Now, once again, he continued to encourage his own self. He continued to talk to his own self. All right, this is also indicates the ill treatment. Means the people. How do people used to maybe how you people used to treat him. He was no one to encourage him or comfort him or to talk regarding this invention and all right. He stood there in the garden beside the wooden table, so pale, small, and thin that he looked like an ancient, consumptive, bespectacled child. The sun had gone down. There was no wind, no sound at all. From where he stood, he could see over a low fence into the next garden, and there was a woman walking down the garden with a flower basket on her arm. He watched her for a while without thinking about her at all. Then he turned to the box on the table and pressed a switch on its front. He is going to start his invention. He is going to listen to a sound. He put his left hand on the volume control and his right hand on the knob that moved a needle across a large central dial like the wavelength dial of a radio. The dial was marked with many numbers in a series of bands starting at 15,000 and going on up to 1 lakh. And now he was bending forward over the machine. His head was cocked to one side in a tense listening attitude. His right hand was beginning to turn the knob. The needle was traveling slowly across the dial, so slowly he could hardly see it move, and in the earphones he could hear a faint, spasmodic crackling. Behind this crackling sound, he could hear a distant humming tone, which was the noise of the machine itself, but that was all. As he listened, he became conscious of a curious sensation, a feeling that his ears were stretching out away from his head, that each ear was connected to his head by a thin, stiff wire like a tentacle, and that the wires were lengthening, that the ears were going up and up towards a secret and forbidden territory, a dangerous ultrasonic region where ears had never been before and had no right to be. So he felt like hearing something which is absolutely unheard so far. The little needle crept slowly across the dial, and suddenly he heard a shriek, a frightful, piercing shriek, and he jumped and dropped his hands. Catching hold of the edge of the table, he started around him as if expecting to see the person who had shrieked. There was no one in sight except the woman in the garden next door, and it was certainly not she. She was bending down, cutting yellow roses and putting them in her basket. So the sound he heard, it was all the sound that the plant made or the flower made while getting cut. So the machine he invented, or with the intention he made it, he had a mind to hear all sort of sounds, not limited to only animals. It also dealt with plants. Again it came, a throatless, inhuman shriek, sharp and short, very clear and cold. The note itself possessed a minor metallic quality that he had never heard before. Clonza looked around him, searching instinctively for the source of the noise. The woman next door was the only living thing in sight. He saw her reach down, take a rose stem in the fingers to one hand, and snip the stem with a pair of scissors. Again he heard the scream. It came at the exact moment when the rose stem was cut. At this point, the woman straightened up, put the scissors in the basket with the roses, and turned to walk away. Mrs. Saunders, Clownza shouted, his voice shrill with excitement. "Oh, Mrs. Saunders!" And looking round, the woman saw her neighbor standing on his lawn, a fantastic, arm waving little person with a pair of earphones on his head, calling to her in a voice so high and loud that she became alarmed. The man was much excited, we can understand. "Cut another one, please cut another one quickly." She stood still, staring at him. "Why, Mr. Clownza?" she said. "What's the matter? Please do as I ask," he said. "Cut just one more rose." Mrs. Slaughter had always believed her neighbor to be a rather peculiar person. Now it seemed that he had gone completely crazy. She wondered whether she should run into the house and fetch her husband. No, she thought, no, he's harmless. I will just humor him. "Certainly, Mr. Clownza, if you like," she said. She took her scissors from the basket, bent down, and snipped another rose. Again Clownza heard that frightful, throatless shriek in the earphones. Again it came, and it came at the exact moment the rose stem was cut. He took off the earphones and ran to the fence that separated two gardens. "All right," he said. "That's enough. No more, please. No more." The woman stood there, a yellow rose in one hand, clippers in the other, looking at him. "I am going to tell you something, Mrs. Saunders," he said. "Something that you won't believe." He put his hands on top of the fence and peered at her intently through his thick spectacles. "You have this evening cut a basket of roses. You have with a sharp pair of scissors cut through the stems of living things, and each rose that you cut screamed in the most terrible way. Did you know that, Mrs. Saunders?" "No," she said. "I certainly didn't know that." Okay, we have already completed the allotted time we have. So up to this much I complete today. I expect each one of you to go through the text, and so far it's covered, and we will be, since it's written in a very clean and clear way, we can understand each and every line. As I complete this chapter, I will be focusing on the various aspects or themes of this particular story. In between, if you find anything to ask, you can ask me definitely in the live class. This much for today. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.